your soul!
Swallow this. Happy Halloween.
Welcome to Optional Dialogue, episode 87. And today, we're going to celebrate Halloween by talking about our top 5 favorite horror movies for Halloween to watch for Halloween. I'm joined once again with Dory. How you doing, Dory?
Hello. Hey.
So this is our second mini episode. If you're wondering why there's only 2 of us, it's because we like to do mini episodes in between the big regular shows. So wait until the next episode because we're going to be talking about, God, so many games, including Spider-Man.
Alan Wake 2.
Yeah.
What else? Maybe Lords of the Fallen. I don't know.
Super Mario Brothers Wonder.
Yep.
I got to talk about Assassin's Creed, and Jane's going to talk about Forza. So we got a loaded show coming up. So this is like a little treat right before it. So we're going to start with our honorable mentions first. I have 3 and Dory has 3. Dory, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So I'll just start with the first one listed on my 3 in no particular order. Aliens is one of my favorite sequels of all time, I think. It's also probably one of the best sequels of all time. I like Alien a lot. I feel like it has a lot of slow moments, though. And Aliens somehow manages to do the impossible of making it a longer movie, but a better paced movie, for me anyway. And, you know, it's obviously Aliens is a bit more of an action film than a horror film at some parts. Yeah. But by and large, it's still a horror film. I think it's one of the best horror films ever. Ridley Scott's directing is incredible. And main protagonist, I believe her name's Ripley. Her relationship with the little girl is awesome. Of course, you've got the classic lines of "Game over, man, game over."
Rest in peace.
As well, rest in peace. As well as you know, when Ripley is in the mech, that rules too. There's just so many iconic moments from this. I really feel like this movie deepens the lore and also like brings out like some much needed action to help the pacing. It's just an excellent movie. Lots of excellent ambiance of the first movie, but with more of a punch, more evenly spaced out. So yeah, Aliens is definitely an honorable mention. Very close to be making my top 5.
Yeah, Aliens is a really good movie. It's probably my second favorite James Cameron movie after Terminator 2. It's my favorite Aliens movie. Although even though the first one is amazing too, because the first one's more of a classic horror movie. It's like very slow, and it's basically a slasher film if you look at it that way. It's a haunted house movie, just on a spaceship. Yeah. But Aliens is more of an action movie, but it still has a lot of horror elements, like you said.
For sure.
And the atmosphere is really amazing. The storyline, characters, setting. The
scene where they've discovered the nest. Especially with all the eggs and stuff like that, and the queen, and the scenes with the flamethrowers and stuff like that. I mean, all that stuff's just really, really good.
Yeah. Now, do you want to do one at a time, or you want to do all 3 in a row?
Yeah, we'll just do one at a time. So you go. What's an honorable mention for you?
So honorable mention for me. Okay, maybe this is controversial. I don't know. My top 5 is very personally for me. So my honorable mention would be The Exorcist. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. The horror, I don't think the scares hold up anymore. Even my students have seen the movie and they don't find it scary. I think nowadays we're just so used to gore and horror and all that it doesn't hold up. I think what makes that movie really scary is how powerless the mom is to help her daughter. Because she doesn't believe she's not religious at all. So she doesn't really believe. So she goes through every scientific method to help her daughter. She tries everything, and then no one can help her. So for as her last resort, she has to return to priest, exorcist, and it's like, and that's where like you put yourself in her shoes, where it's like you feel so powerless to help your daughter.
Yeah.
Deal with that. I think that's where the true horror is, and I think the awesome thing about that movie as well is the subtlety. Like a jump scare in that movie is just like a drawer opening up. Like it's not like nowadays where the monster roars and there's a big loud scene and something crashes through the window. It's very subtle, which I prefer in horror. I always prefer way more subtle horror movies, and I think the visuals really hold up. I think it feels really grounded. I think and that's what really works. I think the only scene that kind of throws me off is the when her head spins, because that doesn't really make sense logically. She's possessed. There's no reason why her neck should just be able to spin. That kind of that's like the worst part of the movie for me. But other than that, what makes the movie so effective is like it really feels like a real life situation, in which people argue that it's happened to some people. So it's. I think that as someone that's not religious, I can relate to the mom, where it's like if I had to really turn to a last resort and I felt powerless. That's the true horror of the movie for me. And then the acting is amazing, and and everything, and the theme song is iconic. So.
Yeah, I think definitely the best part of Exorcist. I'm definitely in the minority here. I'm not a big Exorcist fan. I didn't really enjoy the film. Me and Kim both, unfortunately. But I will say the child who plays the girl who is you know possessed. I mean, she does a fantastic job, and I mean,
Linda Blair.
A lot of the acting in there is great. Yeah, especially for her age. I mean, just to be able to balance that and. And you know, especially since Exorcist came out in I think the 70s, maybe.
Yes.
1973. Yeah. So it's incredible what she was able to do and what the practical effects were able to do.
Yeah.
So those are definitely some highlights of the film.
Yeah, and I could have mentioned Exorcist 3 too, because that's like one of my favorite movies of all time. But don't watch the second one. The second one's terrible. All right. So what's your next honorable mention?
Yeah, second honorable mention for me is Cult of Chucky. The recent Chucky movies have been incredible. The recent Chucky media has been incredible, including the television series. Kim and I are on season 2. I know season 3 recently came out. I think we're a couple episodes to season 2, and then you know this month has been crazy busy for us. Yeah, it's Cult of Chucky is such an excellent film. It delivers on a lot of things. It gives you, you know, I won't go into too specifics. I don't want to spoil, but it gives you a bad ending that is kind of satisfying because you know that it's going to continue. Cult of Chucky is a continuation from The Curse of Chucky, which in of itself is a continuation of, like, I think, Child of Chucky or whatever.
Seed of Chucky.
Seed of Chucky. Thank you. I haven't seen that or Bride of Chucky, so. Yeah, I think Chucky's difficult because he's had a very bumpy road in terms of films and stuff like that. He's at his best, I think, when the horror and the comedy is mixed and we're not playing Chucky for, you know, full-on horror, because he's just not intimidating. He's a doll, right? There are ways to make him intimidating, obviously, and I think Cult of Chucky is the one that gets the best out of that, out of him being intimidating. There's just a lot of things that they do with the main character who has been committed to an insane asylum based on her discussions of like Chucky to doctors and stuff like that. Excuse me one sec. Sorry, still getting over a cold. And it ends in a very kind of satisfying but also bleak way that I feel like horror movies have a very tough time kind of balancing often. It's always hard with horror movies or any movie really to give people kind of a sad ending, not a sad ending necessarily, but a dark ending. And horror movies have always tried to balance giving people dark endings that are also satisfying, where sometimes good doesn't win. And so, yeah, I really think, you know, the gore is on point, the practical effects are on point, the acting's on point. So many things about this movie really work for me. You know, there's still a little part of me in the background that like can't completely take the movie seriously because, of course, it's Chucky. But I think they use that as effectively as they really could in a movie. It was a straight to DVD for both Curse and Cult, but they're arguably much better than any of the movies beforehand. Even the original, I don't think is particularly good. Yeah, and go if you do like these two movies, Curse and Cult of Chucky. Absolutely go watch, as I'm sure Seb will back me up on, the new Chucky show that's on. I think it's on USA or something.
Yeah.
It's on Peacock anyway, and it's phenomenal. Really makes use of the entire Chucky lore and brings in a lot of old favorite characters and cameos, and they're still using Brad, I can't remember his last name, but still using the classic like Chucky character voice instead of Mark Hamill, who, that the less said about that remake is the better, probably.
Yeah, Brad Dourif. Yeah, Dourif.
Yes,
and his daughter.
Dourif. And also one thing I also want to shout out about Chucky too is that Chucky has always been such a great series for LGBT rep. It helps that I believe the creator of Chucky himself is gay, or at least is an ally of the gay community.
I believe he's gay.
Himself.
I'm pretty sure he's gay.
Yes, I believe he's. Yes, I'm pretty sure as well. And so, like, for example, Seed of Chucky, I believe their kid ends up being like gender fluid, which was way ahead of its time. And in the recent Chucky series, and also in the recent couple of movies, there's lesbian rep and LGBT rep in general, and of course the Chucky TV show has a gay romance as well. So it's great. And I love that part of it too.
How deep are you into season 2?
I honestly think just maybe a couple of episodes. They only just discovered Chucky was taking photos of them. Okay. I think they have him tied up or something like that, and trying to get answers out of him.
Oh, because I was gonna mention something, but I asked you first because I don't want to spoil it. So that's why. It connects to what you were talking about, but I don't want to ruin it for you. Yeah. But yeah, it definitely it has LGBT themes for sure in Chucky. That's one of the most interesting and coolest parts about Chucky series is that there's a lot of layers to it. I think Cult of Chucky is the best Chucky movie of all time. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of crazy considering it's like the 7th movie or something.
Yeah.
No, some of them a lot of the Chucky movies, I mean, they're not really objectively good movies, but they're fun movies. I like Bride of Chucky, like that's what I grew up with. But I also watched the first one a lot. It was a really good movie. I love the performances. I love his daughter. Like, she looks just like him, and she sounds like him. She's a great actress. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, it's a really good choice. So my honorable mention next is another controversial one because it's a classic, but it is Halloween. John Carpenter's Halloween.
Oh wow, the original.
Yeah, the original. It's not in my top 5 because, like I said, my list is very specific for me. Sure. This is a masterpiece. I think it changed the genre. Obviously, like once Halloween came out, everybody wanted to do a slasher, so slashers took over for like 20 years, especially in the 80s. It's not necessarily scary. What it really does well is suspense. Like, it does the thrills really well. Like, it has like moments where he hides in the shadows, and you know he's behind her, but she doesn't know, and you kind of just like waiting for him to attack her. And that's where it really shines. Again, it's one of those things where I like about movies, horror movies. It's subtle. It does like, it feels like a grounded movie. It feels like there's something that would actually happen. Not so much like getting shot 7 times, falling out the window and getting up, but more like, the stalking and things like that. Like, a lot of women can like understand that. Like, always feeling the sense of paranoia. Like, someone's always watching you, and that does a really good job with that. And it's a low budget film. You gotta respect that it's an independent film, and it made millions of dollars on a cheap budget. And it's like one of the highest. It's one of the most probably the best, like one of the highest selling indie films of all time. I want to say that's the best, but I'm not sure it's the best, but it's definitely one of them. It changed it changes the genre forever and changed movies forever. I mean, it's a classic. Michael Myers is an icon now at this point. I mean, they probably didn't even need to do another one. I think I kind of like the ending of that it's ambiguous. Yeah. Is he really dead or not? Obviously, he lives, but I like it. If you just watch it as its own movie, it's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. So
yeah. I mean, liberally on Wikipedia it says 325,000 budget, which is nothing. And box office they made 70 million.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah.
I,
Yeah, I mean a little bit about the sequel too, which I think is underrated. I think it's a good sequel, but it's not. I absolutely agree with Seb. Not necessary at all. Um, Halloween is one of my favorite franchises of all time, simply for the first and partially the second and H2O, which I don't have on here, but is a great movie as well. Yeah, the studio. I mean, you look at that at the box office versus budget. It's hard to it's very easy to blame the studio and all that stuff for making Carpenter do a sequel when he didn't want to. But it's hard to look at those numbers and go, yeah, let's never do this again when they made such a profit. But yeah, I'll talk more about Halloween later. I could talk about it forever.
right. All right. So what's your next honorable mention?
Yeah, my last honorable mention is more of a recent film. Actually, Cult of Chucky's fairly recent, relative to Aliens at least.
Yeah.
Ready or Not. Ready or Not is a movie that came out, I want to say about 5-6 years ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty recent. It's an excellent kind of it's a spin or take on the what is that short story called? It's like the greatest, the most dangerous game of all, or the most dangerous game, or whatever. It's like a take on that. This woman marries into this family. They end up having this really fucked up ritual where they end up like, they have to give this sort of sacrifice to a god. There's all this stuff, and it's just such, horror often tries to do social commentary, and I think a lot of times it actually succeeds more than critics give it credit for. But this is a case of absolutely knocking it out of the park in terms of just searing criticism of rich people and just how they view poor people. It's excellent in terms of its black humor. It's excellent in terms of its acting. The blood is great. The twists are great. There's so much of this film works on a lot of levels for me. It was one of my favorite movies that I watched with Kim a couple of years ago. And it's pretty much a perfect 5 for me out of 5. Really, the only thing that holds it back is a little bit of the exposition for why the family's doing what they're doing. And some of the background lore stuff is a little weak compared to everything else. But other than that, and that's really a nitpick, other than that, the film is incredible and definitely worth watching, especially if you like one of those films where the hero is kind of an underdog and definitely going against the odds and has to eventually, figure out who actually is her ally and who's not. It's very good. It's very, very good. And like I said, there's a lot of funny moments too. A lot of laugh out loud moments mixed in with a lot of blood and violence.
I have not seen that movie, but I have heard of it.
Yes, very good.
I really like black comedy, so I'm gonna check that out for sure.
Yeah.
My last honorable mention, even though I have like 50 of them, but my last honorable mention would be another John Carpenter movie, which would be The Thing. I think The Thing is one of the greatest horror movies of all time. First of all, because the atmosphere, being isolated in like Antarctica and the blizzard, and there's like this parasite monster that just like absorbs everything, and it obviously Among Us is based on it. It's really creepy. Like an alien can disguise itself as a person and then just transform into something. But I think obviously what the movie really stands out is the special effects. I mean, special effects are just absolutely incredible. I mean, they're all practical. Like pretty much like 99% of it is practical, and it holds up so well. It's a disgusting movie, and I love it. It like, but it's not just that. It's like all the characters are memorable. Like the way they handle like trying to figure out who it is memorable. Like the ending is ambiguous. It just has everything you want in a horror movie. Like the atmosphere, the characters, the setting, the music, the cool creature, mystery. It's just a really, really, really good movie. I mean, it's a gore fest, and I love that. So it's a must watch if you have not seen that. I mean, I think pretty much every horror fan has seen The Thing, but and it's actually a remake, I believe. So that's kind of funny too. It's nothing like that. The original.
I rewatched, or not rewatched. I watched The Thing a couple of years ago for the first time, and I loved it. I think the score is incredible. The practical effects are ingenious. and highly vaunted. I believe it's another John Carpenter joint.
Yes.
So that's another feather in his cap in terms of horror movies. It's a classic of the genre, obviously hugely influential in the kind of social horror game where you don't know who's who. It's it's really great. And honestly, would be eligible for my honorable mentions if my honorable mentions kept going. It's a really great film, and I love that ambiguous ending a lot. And they don't give you the answer to who it is for sure. You can make your own theories and stuff like that, but they don't go like, oh well, it's actually.
There is a canon ending though, because the video game that came out on PS2 is a
right.
Is a sequel, and it's confirmed to be canon. So it does tell you what happens.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually heard recently that the thing was, as a PS2 game, was interesting.
It's underrated.
And didn't get the underrated. Didn't get the praise. I never played it, but I've heard good things about it.
I never played it, but I watched so many videos on it that I feel like I know the
Yeah.
story. So I don't have to play it anymore at this point because I've already seen enough. Like I've seen all the whole
sure.
story and everything.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're gonna talk about our actual top 5. Now these are my definitive top 5. Like these are the movies I go to all the time for like Halloween. These are all horror movies, but there is some comedy in there too. But I'll let Dory do hers first. So
Sure.
What's your number 5?
Number 5, we're going to start off on a little slightly humorous note. One of my favorite movies of all time, not just horror movies, is Shaun of the Dead. I love Shaun of the Dead so much. I love the, Hot Fuzz is one of my favorite action films of all time. Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorite horror films of all time. I could watch Shaun of the Dead so many times. That montage where it's like, we go here, and then we go there, and then we go to the pub, and we have a pint, and everything's good. And it's like, I fucking love that joke. And they don't overuse it. They use it just the right amount of times. It's a classic movie. There's so many cool throwbacks to other zombie films. I honestly think Shaun of the Dead's probably the best zombie movie of all time, which is nuts, because it's largely a parody and not, like, supposed to be taken completely serious, but they also mix a lot of serious elements with it as well. I think that the ending is surprisingly dark, given it's a lot of its comedy roots, but it works so well, and it's just an excellent film. It'll have your gut busting either from laughter or from horror in terms of the gore. There's just a lot of good stuff. People get their comeuppance. A lot of plot. Like I think one of the best things about Shaun of the Dead is all these little plot points come back. You'll have a little reference at the beginning. They'll be like, oh, that's cute, but, it probably won't go anywhere. And then 20 minutes later, they'll pay that off, or they'll reference it, or they'll make a joke about it. And you'll be like, oh, man, they really paid attention to this. You get the same thing in Hot Fuzz, too, where you'll have, like the you fascist line that's in a Hot Fuzz, like a few different times, a few different situations. And the context, like, just makes it funnier every time. So yeah, I love Shaun of the Dead. I think I've seen it like 2 or 3 times, which for me is a lot for a movie, unless it's Star Wars or whatever. But like generally, like I don't really rewatch films unless I really love them, and I've seen Shaun of the Dead at least 2 or 3 times, which, like I said, for me is a lot. But yeah, it's a phenomenal film. One of my favorite horror films, and probably my favorite zombie film.
Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen that movie 50 times at this point. I've watched it so many times, and it still holds up. I mean, the Cornetto trilogy is amazing. Like I love Edgar Wright's movies. I love his style of humor.
Yes.
And Hot Fuzz is part of that trilogy, and Shaun of the Dead really holds up, not just like as a parody, but as its own, like you said, as its own movie. It's one of the best zombie movies ever. I love the scene where he just like goes to the store and just, he's oblivious to all the zombies around him. He doesn't even pay attention. He doesn't notice at all. It's just like the subtle moments. I love the scene where they beat the zombie up with the pool sticks playing to Queen. It's such a memorable scene.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and I like the people get like people that get what they deserve as well. Yeah, it's just one of the best comedies of all time. I love when zombies show up and they throw records at their head and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just it's a really, really good movie. I gotta watch it actually again. It's been a while since I watched it, but
yeah,
now you got me in the mood to watch that. That'd be a really good movie to watch.
It is so good.
Yeah. So
I've seen it. I remember one of the times I rewatched it. The most recent time was with Kim, and she loved it too. But I think the second time I watched it was long time ago when I was in college in like 2011 or something, and we watched it on this huge screen and projector.
Yeah.
I loved it then too. Just such a great film. But yeah, go ahead.
I just love the satire of everybody just like moving on. It's like, oh, we're just gonna use zombies like as TV shows, and we're just gonna keep them as pets. It's really funny. All right, so my top fifth movie is American Werewolf in London. That's one of my. I think to me that's the greatest werewolf movie ever made, and it always will be unless something really blew me away. It has the greatest transformation scene of all time, like the best.
Yes,
nothing
true.
will ever top it. But what really works about that movie is it has subtle comedy. Like there's a lot of funny moments in that movie, like when he's like naked in the park, and like this little British kid says like, "Oh, this is a naked American man. He stole my balloon." And there's like it's really random too, because like there's a scene where like he dreams and there's like Nazi werewolves and they just like shoot up his family. It's
wow.
But I think what really works is like it's just like the build up, like the mystery, like when they venture into the town and everybody's like looks at them suspiciously, and then his friend gets attacked, and and the practical effects look amazing. Like this movie is a gore fest. No, I want to say like when the werewolf scene actually happens, like when he attacks the city, more people die from like just crashing their cars and getting ran over than the actual werewolf itself. Like werewolf doesn't even kill that many people. Like he decapitates a guy and that's about it. And then and I really like the werewolf design. It feels like an animal, then like rather than like a humanoid looking like wolf. It still looks really, really, really good. I think it's one of the greatest horror movies ever made. It's an absolute classic. I mean, it's a cult classic, I guess.
For sure, yeah. I love the parts when he's in the theater with his dead friend and his friend's talking to him, and he's kind of like giving all these like darkly humorous responses to him and stuff like that. Like that shit's great.
Absolutely. But the go-to scene for that movie is the transformation scene. That's the scene that like it's one of the most iconic horror scenes of all time. It's the practical effects are just, and I've learned how they've done it. Like I've gone to horror shows of how they do those special effects, and it's really, really interesting. So definitely recommend. One of the greatest horror movies of all time. So, Dory, what's your number 4?
Yeah, I just want to say about Werewolf. Great film. Love the transformation. The horror comedy, the comedy part of the horror hits me harder than the horror part. But in general, I think that's a great film. My number 4, Doctor Sleep. Now, Seb's already put some controversial stuff out there. Here's my controversial take. I've seen The Shining twice, and I don't like it. And I know it's a very, very controversial pick or opinion to have. I think it's not a terrible movie or whatever, but for me, The Shining is very boring. It's not very scary. And I guess by the time I watched The Shining for the first time, I had seen that character from Jack Nicholson. I felt like I had already seen it 10 times in different movies about him being kind of, crazy and angry and stuff. So for me, it just doesn't hit. But everything that movie is claimed to be is what I think Dr. Sleep actually is. And that's wild because I didn't know if I would like Dr. Sleep. I held off on watching it for a while. I was like, oh, it's a sequel to The Shining. I know it's obviously not done by Kubrick, but it's, so I was like, I don't know how I'm going to like this. It is just done incredibly on pretty much every level. I think the acting is done superbly. I think the way that they tie in to The Shining, even though I'm not a huge fan of The Shining, is sublime. I think the references they make are not too over the head, don't beat you over the head that hard. I think the new characters are really great. The new villains, I think honestly, the main villain is one of the most underrated villains. She is just an incredible kind of character to look at and deal with throughout that film. Ewan McGregor, I believe, plays an older Danny, and he is just awesome. You really see the way he's struggled with his life ever since. It's just such an excellent film. it really made for me the Shining universe into like a much more exciting one. I also think like some of the scenes are pretty brutal. It's not like super scary or super gory or anything like that, but I think they do pretty much everything really, really well with the environmental, the atmosphere, the acting, the writing. Yeah, it's pretty much for me, pretty much a quote unquote perfect movie. As a follow up to one of the most beloved movies of all time, one of the most beloved horror movies of all time. Yeah, I think it deserves more praise than it gets.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good movie as well. I like the new characters as well. It was like vampires this time.
Yeah. She had like a top hat, and there was like a community of them, and
Yeah.
they were all after the Shine, I think. And yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, it was a really good sequel. I mean, I love the original, obviously. I mean, Stanley Kubrick's one of my favorite directors, but I think one thing that movie was missing was that was in the book was there's more development of the dad being like a nice family man, and then the transition, his downfall hits more. While in the it's kind of rushed, like Jack Nicholson kind of looks like a crazy person the entire time.
Yeah.
It doesn't really hold up. I mean, he's amazing when he's the actual killer because Jack Nicholson's amazing, but
Right.
But when he's a normal guy, it doesn't really hold up well. But yeah, Doctor Sleep is really really good. That was a great choice for Danny and things like that. I mean, it's a book as well, I believe. So
Yes, it is. Yes.
I never read it personally, but yeah, it's really I really enjoyed that movie. All right, so my number 4 is one of the greatest punk rock movies of all time, one of the greatest zombie movies of all time. That is Return of the Living Dead from 1985. I mean, man, this has got to be one of the greatest dark comedies of all time. I mean, this movie's a full-on comedy, which is kind of feels weird to say because if you look at the movie as a whole, like it's a horror movie. I mean, the zombies, they eat the people's brains, but it's very popular. It's very important in pop culture because this is the movie that made people think that zombies eat brains, right? Because all the zombies want to eat everybody's brains. And there's a lot of moments in this movie that shouldn't be funny, but they're hilarious. Like, there's a gas that makes things come back to life. So, like, there's a scene where there's, like, a puppy cut in half. Like, there's, like, a science experiment. And it's just, like, whimpering, and they keep whacking it with the stick to shut it up. And it shouldn't be funny, but it's freaking hilarious. And it's things like that. Like when they, like, one of the first zombie wakes up, it's like he's, like, yellow, and he runs at them, and they try to cut him up, but, like, cutting him up... They try to destroy his head, but it doesn't work in this universe. So the only way to do it is burning it. One thing about this movie is everything it always gets progressively worse. Like, they try to burning the body to stop it, and then the gas goes in the air and goes in the graveyard, so all the zombies wake up in the graveyard. And it gets to the point that it gets so bad that they have, like, nuked the city and stuff. But where this movie also really shines is, like I said, punk rock. All the main characters are all like this gothic like group of people, like this gang of people, and they have such like there's like all of them are just like these like iconic like memorable characters. The punk rock guy, he's like this is a way of life. Like the gothic side of it is like the punk side is like this is the way of life. It's a great line. And what's her name? What's her name? What's the one? The one girl says she wants to be eaten alive, like that's what she wants to be, like that's how she wants to die, and then she ends up getting eaten alive, and then when the moment actually happens, she like obviously doesn't want to die. So the irony's funny, and then she's like naked through the whole movie. She's like a naked zombie. She runs around the whole city naked. It's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. It has so amazing practical effects. The zombies look incredible. There's the scene where they're interrogating the lady zombie cut in half, and you can see her spinal cord flopping around and the spinal fluid coming out.
Wow.
Have you ever seen that movie?
I actually have never heard nor seen of this film, and now it's going on my list for next year. So.
Oh wow, yeah, it's probably one of the greatest '80s horror movies of all time. It also has one of the greatest horror characters of all time, which is Tarman. Tarman was my ultimate scariest thing I ever saw when I was a kid. Like, he used to scare the hell out of me. Like, he's like the slimy zombie that kind of like moves around like a puppet. It's like a mixture of puppetry and an actor, and it was scary as hell when he comes out and he says brains. He chases the girl. I'll post a link up to it after this.
Yeah.
It's one of the, it's such a great movie. I absolutely love it. It's so 80s. It's one of the greatest 80s movies. But if you like that punk rock culture, it's amazing. I used to watch it all the time. My dad had it on VHS. I still remember the cover. It has like this cool cover with like these skeletons standing in front of a grave or behind a grave. It's just, even the cover looks punk rock. It has like a mohawk and stuff. It's just a great movie. I can't praise it enough. One of the greatest. Also, watch Red Letter Media's review of it as well. They did a really awesome review on that movie. Amazing movie. All right, Dory. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is Nightmare on Elm Street, the original.
Yes.
I love this film so much. You know, I will give a quick shout out to Dream Warriors, which I believe is the 4th film. I think that's an underrated sequel and really, really good as well. But nothing beats the original. Robert Englund is, of course, incredible in this film as Freddy. The special effects for its time were impressive. Obviously, they have not aged perfectly. But even now, you can see why they would have been scary back in the 80s. Heather Locklear, I want to say, or Langlear. Can't remember her last name. But she's incredible in this film as well. Just the general of this being based on, I believe it was based on this newspaper article of people dying in their sleep in another country. And it was just such a scary thought to Wes Craven, rest in peace, that he based the whole movie on it, at least partially. And so it was really an incredible act of inspiration there. It's really well done in terms of the gore. Obviously, some of the most fantastical and fantastic displays of gore in horror. People, the one character getting risen to the ceiling and then just split open and all the blood just pouring onto the bed. I mean, that's incredible. Just really creepy stuff. The hand coming through the bathtub and stuff like that. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's just there's so many memorable scenes. I believe he also sticks out his tongue on the phone on that one. One of my favorite low-key things about Freddy throughout, and New Nightmare too, I want to give that a shout out. I love New Nightmare as well. Thanks. Is that Freddy is ultimately he's kind of undead, but he's just a guy when he's out of the dream world. So he ends up being it's almost it's kind of like Scream or Scary Movie. You can hit Freddy with a fucking lamp or something, or he'll trip or whatever, and he'll react like a normal human being would. And it does, in a way, kind of humanize him, because it's kind of slapstick in a way. It does, I don't mean humanize him in terms of his morals, but more in terms of his him being a human being and not like Jason in that way. Obviously, unless Freddy's in the dream world, then it's different. But one of my favorite parts is whenever somebody punches Freddy when he's out of the dream world, and he just goes ah, because he's just a guy in a fucking costume with big fucking Wolverine nails. So I love that shit. This is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It has some of the most iconic horror scenes of all time. The gore is excellent. The acting is excellent. The twist at the end is great. And to top it all off, as a franchise, there are actually other movies besides the original that I think are great and worth watching, like New Nightmare and Dream Warriors. So yeah, Robert Englund too, legend.
Yeah, the first movie is incredible. It's a master. It's one of the most iconic horror movies of all time. Like you said, great atmosphere, great gore. Freddy Krueger was more sinister in the first one. They made him more goofy as the movies went on. Welcome to prime time, bitch. And that's I love this. I love that line. But I think what I love about it too is the performance. Robert Englund's performance of Freddy is just incredible. It's so memorable. And like obviously like one of the greatest scenes in the movie is when Johnny Depp gets pulled through the bed and blood just flies through the bed. Like that's like one of the most iconic. And then when she gets floated up, the only thing I don't like about the movie is the ending. I don't like when she gets dragged to the door because it looks goofy. It looks like a doll gets dragged to the door through the little window. But great movie. I'm very mixed on the sequels. The second movie is not even close to the first one, but I don't hate it. It has kind of a gay undertone to it because the character feels like he's questioning himself and he was insecure or something.
They have a whole documentary about that came out a couple years ago. So it was definitely intentional. Me and Kim are actually going to watch that this year, so I'll report back. But yes. Lots of gay subtext in that one.
Yes, and then the third one is Dream Warriors, and I think that's probably the second best one.
I like New Nightmare a little more, but New Nightmare actually has my favorite, one of my favorite moments in all of horror/horror comedy, but it's where, again, the returning actress from the first film, she actually is in the dream world, and she I think she gets the drop on Freddy. This is towards the end of the film, and she just fucking wallops him, and it's like Looney Tunes-esque. He just reels back, and it's so fucking funny. And she has this classic line right before. I don't even remember what the hell it is, but it's I'm right here, bitch, or something like that, calling him a bitch. It's just so fucking funny. I don't know if it's supposed to be funny or not, but Freddy just gets fucking owned for a second, and it's just incredible. The franchise as a whole is probably not worth watching, but these three movies that we're talking about here are, which is impressive, honestly, for a horror franchise, because usually you only get one or two good movies, not three.
Yeah, and New Nightmare I love because it's meta. Which is funny because he made Scream as well, I believe. So
yes, he did. Yep.
So that was right before Scream. So my number 3 is, I don't know if it's underrated, but it's definitely not super popular. It is Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat is an anthology series film. It came out in 2007. It stars one of the most iconic characters at this point now, Sam, who's he's like a trick or treating demon. He looks like a little kid. And he wears a sack on his head, and he walks around like a lollipop. And he punishes people that break tradition. His role is if you go against Halloween tradition, he kills you in a brutal way. Not always through him, but indirectly through other things. So what I like about it is that it has different stories, but they all have an overlapping story connected by him, obviously. For example, one character blows out a jack-o'-lantern, going against the superstition, and that's how she gets punished. And then so let me start with this. First of all, there's one story where there's a bunch of girls partying, and they're all secretly werewolves, and they have these guys all tied up, and then they just turn into werewolves, and it's really it looks really awesome, and they eat all the guys. And there's another one where there's a bunch of kids that died on a bus, and there's this story is focused on kids, and they prank this. They always prank this one girl, and they do some. I forget what they do, but they wake up all the dead kids, and the dead kids get revenge on the bullies, and it's it's actually pretty gruesome if you're not into seeing kids get killed. I mean, they don't show it, but what you hear, the crunching noise stuff, is really good. And there's also the creepy dad who poisons a kid, and this kid just pukes out blood, it's a gallon of blood. And
Yikes.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest Halloween movies ever. It's definitely a must watch. It's one of the greatest anthology movies ever. It's a cult classic now. It's gotten more and more popular through the years. I think they're doing a sequel, but I'm not sure. I think it's definitely time. It came out in
2007, so I would say so.
Yeah, it's in active development right now, so it's not greenlit yet, but it seems like it might be happening. It's really, really, really good. I think you should watch it next year.
Yeah, I'll put it on the list.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really really good. It's one of the I watch it every year. It has great Halloween atmosphere. It just feels like Halloween. It has that like it has that like the look. Like it happens like this movie takes place during Halloween. So it's all about the superstition and the tradition and trick or treating and all that. It feels like a Halloween movie. It has that tone. Like it's just the perfect Halloween movie to watch. So definitely watch. Sam, like I said, Sam is one of my favorite horror characters. I have his pop figure back there. I have my dad loves him. He has him as a blow up on the front yard, things like that. So
nice.
He's become a classic character now. Every time I see a drawing, like all the classic horror icons, they always put him in the front because he's the smallest one. So, all right, number 2. What is your number 2, Dory?
Yeah. So, be real. I'm gonna be real about this. My number 2, my number 1. Honestly, you could probably flip them around. But I think ultimately my number 2 is Psycho. Psycho is arguably one of the most famous horror movies, slasher films of all time.
I would say it's the
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
It came before Halloween, but
Yeah.
it didn't really popularize the genre like Halloween did. It gave more rise to it, but yeah, Halloween's definitely the one that popularized it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to say about this film that I don't think gets enough talk, although I could be wrong. I'm not a auteur or anything like that, or a film critic, but is the soundtrack. I've never had a movie that gives me this much tension, this much stress, this much, just pure like emotion from it than the Psycho soundtrack. I feel like you could make a whole documentary about how this was done musically. It's just incredible. Obviously, it's done by Hitchcock, so the directing is incredible, as are with most of his films.
Yep.
The acting, the writing are all great. Excuse me. The only thing I don't like about it is I don't like the last 5-10 minutes or whatever of the movie where he's kind of sitting there and like they're explaining everything that happened, and it feels already like the movie's kind of like explain the twist and like you already understand the twist, so it feels kind of pointless. I don't like that part, but I also understand back in the 60s that people might not have they might not have thought that obviously education about media was less than it is now. It just was. Just because we had less access to media and less easily. So I get it.
Yeah.
It's not a huge deal, but it does kind of like stick to me, which is probably why I put my number 1 where I put it instead of here.
Yeah.
But even with that said, I mean, it's a classic for a reason. The shower scene, the stuff about his mom. I will say, Kim and I just watched Psycho 2 like about a night ago or something like that. Underrated sequel. It's great at what it does. It's kind of its own movie, so don't expect just a redo of Psycho 1. But Anthony Perkins is in it, so I mean it's got a direct follow up. And I honestly think the directing is really good. The acting is really good. The writing is really good. You're left kind of wondering what's going on throughout the whole film. And they do kind of explain it at the end, but it doesn't take like a ton of time like it does in the original. So yeah, I love Psycho. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, let alone one of my favorite horror movies. Just the soundtrack alone is just worthy of praise and awards. It's just such a good bad time.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest movies of all time. I mean, Psycho 2 is okay, and there's 4 Psycho movies, and the remake with Vince Vaughn. Don't watch that one. That one's terrible. But the original one is a masterpiece. It still holds up really, really well. Just the atmosphere and the suspense. Because like I said, subtlety works in horror the best. And that's what this movie does really, really well. And for the time, you never saw a main character just get killed on screen like that. That's what really makes that movie iconic, and memorable. It was a pioneer. Hitchcock is one of the greatest. We can have a whole conversation just for Hitchcock alone. But yeah, Psycho is an amazing, amazing movie. All right. So my number 2. So let me just put this up. My number 2 is Cabin in the Woods. Now, Cabin in the Woods, why I love it so much is because it references everything I love about horror. It has every single monster you can think of in the same movie. It's misleading at first because you think it's just a generic slasher movie about how teenagers get killed in a cabin. And then it does a whole meta overview of horror, the whole genre. It has the killer clown, giant snake, witches, zombies, killer unicorn.
I was about to say, don't forget that fucking unicorn.
The mermaid. Thing. Yeah, it's and there's a lot of comedy too. It's like a dark comedy. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's just such a good time. It's a complete gore fest. I love the elevator scene. It's just I can watch the scene all the time. I love like scenes where like you can pause the movie and have all these things in the background. Look, there's always something new you discover. It's such a fun time. Go ahead.
One of my favorite parts, real quick, is when they're in the basement and they're picking up the book and they start reading Latin, and it's like, when the fuck did he learn Latin? Why are we reading something with Latin in it? That's never good. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's really, really good. When I went to Horror Nights, I did the Cabin in the Woods haunted house, and it was really, really awesome. So that even further made me love the movie. I just love all the references. I mean, horror is one of my favorite genres, and I get every reference they reference. So, it's really, really, really good. It still holds up really well. I love the ending. I love that it just fits the tone of the movie very well. Spoiler: everybody dies, like in a cool way. In a cool
Romeo
way.
and Juliet, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, in a very cool way. Yeah, I mean, I like the ending because it I'm not gonna say it's deep or whatever, but it gives you a little something to think about at least, and like at least ponder for like a split second before the ending hits you like a ton of bricks. Yeah,
it's just the whole idea of like horror movies just being like the government watching people get sacrificed to gods for entertainment. Yes, by getting killed by monsters is just really, really awesome. But I love lore though. I'm a huge fan of lore, and I love all those things. Like there's a killer tree, there's a tooth fairy, there's a witch, and there's zombies. Like why? Where did they come from? It doesn't explain it, but who cares?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So yeah.
One of the best parts is where they reference The Ring or The Grudge or various films like that.
Yeah.
And then she dies or whatever, and the kids all gather around and say, "The evil has been defeated," and like people have used that as a meme ever since when like somebody like fucking awful gets canceled or something like that.
Yeah.
So that shit's just so funny. Yeah, this is a great film. There's just a lot of funny things about it. It's got a little bit of Whedonisms in it because it was kind of partially written by Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
But I think still overall the movie is very funny, very witty in an interesting way, not a guffaw way, and just generally a really good time. I've watched it twice, once by myself where I really liked it, and then once with Kim a couple of years ago where I liked it as well. We both enjoyed it. So yeah, it's just a great film, lots of great twists. And even if you already know the twist, it's not a big deal because I feel like you said, there's still so much going on in the background. There's still so much that like it's so cool too because like you're waiting for the person you're watching with if they don't know the twist to like figure out the twist, and that's always a fun part of movies too.
Absolutely. If you don't know the twist, then it's even better. But if you're listening to this, you already know it because I already spoiled it for you.
That's right.
But also you wouldn't be watching this probably. You're probably really into horror, so. Cabin Woods is one of those movies I think pretty much every horror fan has seen. It's a popular movie, so I'm not saying anything cult classic here. Now, Dory, what's your favorite horror movie of all time?
All right, I went back and forth on this. This is why earlier when you mentioned it as an honorable mention, you killed me on the inside a little bit. But Halloween, Halloween the original. The one really that started it all. Michael Myers is one of my favorite horror movie villains, horror movie characters. It's just the unknown of what he is, right? He's the shape. He's just a being. Like, people don't really understand. And later movies, The Curse of Michael Myers and, Revenge or whatever, all those movies tried to like explain like what was going on, but that was lame. Like nobody wanted to know why Michael Myers was doing that. Like that's such a short-term thing. Like, you know, nobody really wants to know deep down like why Michael Myers does what he does or what. You know, it's enough to know that he is a very psychotic individual who had a very disturbed childhood, and that's really and there's something evil inside of him. That's all you really need to know.
Yeah. Now it has more timelines
you know,
than The Flash.
Yes, well, absolutely. 3 different timelines to be exact. Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think Halloween 2 is underrated. Yeah, I do think that's where the franchise should have ended instead of the bizarre Halloween 3.
Actually, I think Halloween 3 is actually underrated, but only because it goes away from Michael Myers. I think it's a good.
I watched that this year with Cam, and I thought there were way too many problems with the plot, but it was definitely a surreal movie to watch.
It's definitely not a great movie. It has problems, but it's underrated in the sense that it's not awful. It has a great Halloween feel to it.
I would recommend people to at least watch it once. Plus the fucking theme song. 7 more days till Halloween or whatever the heck it is.
Silver Shamrock.
Is really really addictive.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It has robots and bugs in the mask but Halloween 1.
Halloween 1, yeah. So this is one I watched with Kim. I think the first or second year we started watching horror movies together. So maybe 2017, 2018. And I had already seen it before, at least once or twice, and I knew I loved it. And this is one of the few movies Kim and I have watched together that has actually like startled her or scared her. I remember she got scared at least 2 or 3 separate times, and I was very surprised because she almost never gets scared from horror movies. So this is such a fun experience to watch with somebody who she had never watched. I don't think she had ever watched Halloween before. It's such a classic. Jamie Lee Curtis is phenomenal in it. All the plot lines are really paid off. Donald Pleasance is incredible in it. A lot of classic scenes of him getting stabbed with a coat hanger and cutting her and stuff like that on the banister, and her falling and him falling out of the side of the house like we talked about earlier, and then disappearing. Like one of the best endings to a movie of all time. Just so good. And of course the theme that's so good that basically Rage Against the Machine and Battle of Los Angeles basically ripped it off on one of their songs. I can't remember which one it is.
It's my ringtone right now.
Yeah, it's such a good fucking theme. It is classic. The whole soundtrack is great. Deborah Hill and John Carpenter, just an incredible duo on this one. Yeah, I mean, there's so much you could talk about. The psychology of stalking, like Seb was talking about earlier, with familial ties, with psychology, with what makes some people do what they do, and like the essence of evil and shit. There's so much you could say about this film, and obviously, again, this is really what kicked it off for the '80s, for better or worse, in terms of the slasher genre and Jason and
I think Friday the 13th is what really started the trend, but Halloween was the original one.
Yeah,
for that.
So yeah, I love this movie to pieces. I could watch it a lot. It has so much going for it, and there's so many good lines, classic scenes. Once again, probably one of my favorite movies of all time, not just one of my favorite horror movies.
Absolutely. Great, obviously masterpiece, as I said, one of the greatest horror movies ever. It's really hard not to put it in my top 5, obviously, but I have so many favorites. But these are my definitive ones. And my number 1 of all time is Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2 to me is the greatest horror movie ever made. It's not. In fact, I wouldn't say it's not even close. I think it's that much better than everything else. No, I really think Evil Dead 2 has every element of what makes a great horror movie. I mean, Sam Raimi's so creative and talented. Like, I just love his style, the way he zooms in and zooms out, the camera, the crazy effects, like when Ash is just getting thrown through the woods and it just has him spinning around, and the camera work is incredible. Like the puppetry, batshit craziness of the whole movie, The effects are still hold up really fun. They're really, really fun to watch. All the makeup is fun to watch. Bruce Campbell has an amazing, amazing performance. He goes all out on this.
Yeah.
Bruce Campbell should have been a bigger star than he ended up being because he could act his ass off in these movies. And
Yeah.
Ash is probably, to me, like one of the greatest characters ever. One of the most iconic like action heroes ever. Even though Army of Darkness is more of a, that one gets more of the action fantasy side. This one is straight up horror movie, but it has that comedy in it that I absolutely love. I just love that Sam Raimi humor that he does in these movies. It has an amazing, amazing effects. I mean, there's so many memorable scenes in that movie. It's, I don't think it's that controversial. Obviously, I mean, it has a cult following, but I think at this point, horror fans typically have this movie as their favorite or one of their favorites. It's one of the most well-known movies, so I'm not saying anything crazy, but it's just batshit crazy, and I absolutely love it for it. I can watch it every single year. It's so good. I gotta watch it again. Actually, I would feel like watching it.
It has been a long time since I've watched any of the Evil Dead movies. I remember in 2016, I think, when I was doing some traveling, I sat down and I watched Evil Dead 1, 2, and 3, and I think I liked 2 the most. But it was really close between 2 and 3. I like 1, but there's some parts of 1 that not great to watch again.
Like the tree scene?
The tree scene, yes, absolutely. But that aside, yeah, the Evil Dead trilogy is one of the most vaunted in all of horror, in all of movies, really. And it's tremendous. I love the character of Ash, and this is a great choice for your number one. I also remember really enjoying 2 and 3, but it has been about 7 years since I've watched it, so it is probably time for a rewatch. I don't know if Kim's watched it, so that might make for a good movie to watch next year. But yeah, great pick.
Thank you. That was a fun episode. I think we had on a lot of great movies. I feel like we can do another episode like next year, like because talk about movies we haven't talked about yet. Because I can name you like hundreds of movies. So I love horror movies. So, thank you for joining me, Dory.
Absolutely.
You have a happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, boys and ghouls.
See you later. Bye.
I identify as a ghoul.
Bye.